Hey everyone, so glad you are here with us tonight. We have a great night of youth planned. Before we keep going though, a few things that we want you to know. The first is that next week there's actually no youth. We're just gonna pause for 1 week with spring break and just take that first week off. But we'll be back again the following week, so stay tuned for some more details. Second thing is that in just a couple of weeks, in 3 weeks, we already have Easter coming up, which is crazy. And so in 3 weeks, we're going to be doing a bit of an Easter box party. Registration is open. Feel free to sign up for that and make sure that you get the box and reserve that spot for our Easter box party. Before we get to the message tonight, we are going to be playing a little game. We encourage you to participate through the chat. Remember, we've been doing this tribe war thing, right? Guys against girls, and the winning team is going to get something extra special in their Easter boxes. So make sure you participate, earn points for your team, and we look forward to playing those games with you. Let's get going. you ever made a mistake one time and it was something that you weren't really thinking about, something you didn't think it was a big deal, but people noticed and started making a big deal about it, and it feels like people define you by that one mistake? Have you ever had that? Maybe it was something really dumb, something that you kind of regret doing. Maybe it was something that wasn't even your fault, and maybe it was something that, to you was normal. You weren't really thinking much about, but somebody noticed, made a big deal about it, and all of a sudden everybody started talking about it. Do you know what I mean? For me, there are many of those moments, and usually it's around something that I say. Now, I might have shared this already, but I often mix up words. And it's usually, I think, because my brain wants to say things faster than my mouth can keep up with, and so I started blending things together that I don't need to say. I was at church one day talking to Renee's sister, and she punched me as we were chatting. And what I wanted to say was either "you're lucky you're a girl" or "you're lucky I'm a guy," but what ended up coming out of my mouth was a blend of those two things. Something that for the last 12 years I've been hearing from her family. And I said quite loud and for everyone to hear, "You're lucky I'm a girl." Now, in my mind, it made sense. You're lucky you're a girl that I can't punch you. You're lucky I'm a guy that I shouldn't be punching you. And what I ended up saying was, "You're lucky I'm a girl." Now, it happens so often, those kinds of moments where I blend things together and I say something and I don't quite mean to say it, but somebody picks up on it, that Renee's family has started calling them Irwinisms. Now, that's a pretty mellow example of what that can be. I remember one time in elementary school, we were doing presentations in grade 4, and I didn't realize that I did the entire presentation with my zipper down. Everybody from that day on started calling me Fly Boy for the next couple weeks, and it felt traumatizing to me. I was so embarrassed. Something really small, and it felt like everybody picked up on it, everybody picked that out, and my whole life for those weeks was defined by that one mistake that I made. Now, I think you might know what I mean, what I'm talking about. It might have happened to you too, right? Moments like this can be embarrassing. They can be hurtful, especially when people seem to remember it for years and years and years to come. Now, take Thomas, for example. This guy in the Bible, one of Jesus' disciples. He does what he's asked. He kind of keeps his head down. He doesn't really get mentioned a whole lot until we get to a place like John, chapter 20. And Thomas, as this disciple, just kind of does whatever Jesus needs him to do. And one day, the most unbelievable thing happens, right? Jesus dies on the cross. They bury him. They take care of him. 3 days later, some of the disciples start claiming that they've seen him, that they've seen Jesus. Now, Thomas wasn't there to see this for himself, and he's just in total disbelief. People start claiming that Jesus was resurrected. Like, can you believe this? This is insane. And it's almost as if Jesus was, just kind of got bored. He pretended he actually died. He got bored lying in the cave, and he just said, "You know what? That's enough is enough. I'm just going to get up from this nap." It's kind of what it felt like. And Thomas just couldn't understand it. And he said, "Is this really true? I can't believe it until I see it for myself." Now, Thomas had this moment of doubt. What's crazier than having this moment of doubt is that 2,000 years after he had this moment of not being quite sure what to believe, people still call him Doubting Thomas. This guy that followed Jesus around for 3 years, did whatever Jesus asked, followed him, and was willing to die with Jesus for whatever things they were going to do, had this moment of doubt, and people still call him Doubting Thomas for that one incident. That one moment of doubt defined his entire character, or people started defining him by it. That's crazy. Here's what I mean. Okay, I'm going to read for us John chapter 20, the passage that we're talking about, and follow along and see what it means here, or what it talks about here about Thomas. John 20 verses 19 to 29 tells us this. On the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came to them and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hands into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Over the last couple weeks, we've been talking about making these declarations. And we've been making some declarations together, like last week when we said that I will live by faith, not fear. Well, this week, you might have already guessed it, I want to talk a bit about doubts. Doubts and how we handle them, what we do with them. Do we just kind of let them sit? Do we kind of, push them away? How do we handle the things that we wrestle with and the questions that we have? I grew up going to church. My dad was an elder in the church that we attended for a little while, and I went to a Christian school. All the Sunday programs, all the different kids things that I could go to, and I learned a lot about God and the Bible. And I think as a result of all of those things, or maybe partially from all of those things, I felt like I couldn't have any doubts, or I felt like I shouldn't have any doubts. I felt like that if I did, people would question whether I was really a follower of Jesus or not. If I had doubts, or if I told people about my doubts about God, that I wasn't sure if something about God was true, I felt like I wasn't a real Christian. And I really wrestled with some tough questions, things that I wasn't convinced about, things that I was just not sure about yet, like the flood. Did it really flood the whole earth? Right? Like seriously though, where did all the water come from? Where did it go? Why isn't all that water around right now? What do we make of the dinosaurs? Are they mentioned in the Bible at all? What happened to them? Did they just wash away in the flood and that was it? Right? There are things in the Bible that sometimes are a little hard to believe. And I felt like if I expressed that, if I told someone that I wasn't sure, or that I had questions or doubts or things that I was struggling with, that I was telling them that I wasn't sure and trusting in God. Like somehow that if I admitted that I wasn't sure, that I wasn't a good follower of Jesus, that I was letting God down, that I was letting Jesus down, that I was letting my dad down, my family down, if I admitted that I had struggled with some things like that. I felt that if I admitted that, I admitted that Jesus wasn't real. Here's the point though. Here's the thing that I want us to know. The thing that I have come to accept and walk with and come to understand that I wish I knew earlier. Okay? That there is no shame in having doubts. Everyone has them. Seriously, everyone does. We might not be doubting the same things. We might not doubt everything all the time. But we question things. Then the stuff happens that we're not sure about, that we just don't, take right away. That takes us some time to process and work through. We have these moments of doubt, and it happens. One of the things that I love about the story of Thomas is that Jesus didn't shame Thomas for having those doubts. He didn't not show up to Thomas, even though he showed up to the rest of the disciples. Jesus doesn't make fun of him. He doesn't mock him. He doesn't seem to even really blame him for having the questions that he does. Thomas was kind of being logical, and it makes sense that Thomas kind of was like, why didn't he show up to me? If I didn't see it, then how can I be sure? Right? When he first said, "Show me the proof, and then I will believe," Jesus didn't seem to be super mad at him for it. There's no shame in having questions about what we believe or some of the things that we've told that are associated with our faith. And I think in some ways it's actually a good thing, because it shows that we're not just willing to take someone's word and believe it blindly. Some things that we want to wrestle with ourselves and think through ourselves. Having doubts, though, does not mean the same as disbelief. Okay, doubts does not equal disbelief. And that is something that I had to wrestle with and come to, and something that I want you to understand, that doubts do not equal disbelief. Having doubts about something, not being sure about something, not being certain about something, does not mean that we don't believe in the whole thing. Having doubts can lead to disbelief, but having doubts about something does not mean the same thing as not believing in it at all. Just because someone has questions about the flood, or what happened to the dinosaurs, or how is Jesus going to come back one day, doesn't mean that they don't believe in God. Having doubts about the flood and where all that water came from and where it all went, those are legitimate questions that are important for us to ask and to wrestle with. Questions that don't automatically mean that we don't believe that God is real, or that Jesus really died. Right? Just because we wrestle with one thing does not mean that we don't believe in God, and that is something that we have to come to terms with. Doubts do not equal disbelief. But if we're not careful, doubts can turn into the disbelief. And if we let our doubts sit, if we don't ask them, and we kind of just suppress them and push them down again, if we don't explore them and try to find answers to the questions that we have, they very well can turn into disbelief. And so let me warn you right here, okay? Don't let your doubts define your faith. Okay? Don't let your doubts define your faith. Growing up, I had a hard time telling people about some of the doubts that I had and the questions that I had. And partially because I was shy, and I had a hard time just approaching people in general. Partially because I didn't want to be confrontational and have people get upset at me for asking questions, and I felt like they would do that. And all these things, just the combination of those things, caused me to really struggle and wrestle with my faith. Really struggle and wrestle with the things that I could ask and question. Really struggle and wrestle with the questions that I had. It felt like I had questions about things that other people seemed so sure about. And I felt like if they were so sure and they've been walking with God for so long, who am I to question these things? Who am I to ask questions about some of these things? I felt like I was the only one that was asking those questions. That I was the only one that was wrestling with the things and doubting these things and struggling with these things about my faith. What I just didn't know was that others were wrestling with the exact same thing as me, also feeling like they couldn't express the questions that they had. Thomas was a disciple of Jesus for 3 years before Jesus died. And he followed Jesus everywhere. Through the good times, through the bad, through the storms, through being chased by some of the religious leaders of the law. Through thick and thin, Thomas was there. In John 11, it says this about Thomas. When Jesus and the disciples were about to raise Lazarus from the dead, Thomas is the one that says, "Let's go that we might die with him." Right, this dude was a committed follower of Jesus. And he heard Jesus talk about death, his own death. He heard Jesus talk about and hint towards the resurrection. He heard Jesus talk about how difficult it was going to be to follow Jesus after he was gone. He saw Jesus heal people. He saw these miracles happen. He saw Jesus raise people from the dead. But he still wrestled with this incredible miracle that Jesus did, coming back to life himself. In fact, for a whole week, for 8 days, Thomas struggled with this doubt. No matter how much the disciples told him otherwise, Thomas wasn't convinced, and he doubted and he struggled. What we see is Jesus rebuking Thomas. He says, "Stop doubting and believe." Thomas's doubts were festering under the surface, and they began to affect his faith. Thomas's doubts were causing him to lose faith, to lose belief in Jesus. But then Jesus shows up and changed it all for him. Right? Jesus answered Thomas's doubts in a way that he simply couldn't deny. I sometimes catch myself thinking that, if I had been there, if I had only been there when Jesus walked here, if I had only been there when Jesus was healing people and doing his ministry on earth, it'd be so much easier to believe. And then we have this example of Thomas, who was there for all those things and still wrestled with it. It really causes me to ask this question of myself. That if even Thomas doubted, after all that he had been through, after all that he had seen Jesus do, after all that had happened over those 3 years, that if even Thomas doubted, why am I being so hard on myself for asking questions and for doubting some of the things and for struggling to believe some of the things that the Bible talks about? It's normal to wrestle with some of these things, right? There's no shame in having these doubts, but we need to be careful not to let our doubts define our faith. We need to be careful not to let our doubts cause the shaky ground in our faith. How do we do that though? How do we handle them? What do we do with the doubts when they come up and these questions when they arise? Should we just suppress them and stuff them down and kind of try to do our best not to think about it too much? What do we do with our doubts? Here's one of the really important things that we need to do with the questions that we have, with the doubts that we have, is not to suppress them, but to express them, right? To share them, to talk about them, to tell someone the things that we're struggling with believing, the things that we're struggling with just taking as we're reading them in the Bible. So tell them to someone. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's your parent. I would encourage you to talk about it in your small group. Tell your small group, tell your leader some of the questions that they have, that you have, and that you're struggling with. They might not have all the answers. They might not be able to help you through it. But then again, they just might. Your small group leaders are people too. They've had their own doubts and struggles and wrestled with their own things. They might have wrestled through some of the same things that you're wrestling with right now. They might still be wrestling some of the things through some of the things that you're doubting and struggling with and struggling to believe. They've been there. They've experienced these things, and so to share them and to have them walk with you, and it gives them an opportunity to help you, to help each other, right? To one another, each other, as we like to say at our church. If you're not sure if you can tell your parents, if you're not sure if you can talk to your parents about these things, how about just asking them the question, Mom, Dad, have you ever struggled to believe that the flood covered the whole earth? Or, Mom, Dad, are there things in the Bible that you're struggling with believing, or things that you have had doubts about? Again, they're people too that have had to wrestle with some of the questions and the doubts that came to their mind, that have read through the Bible and worked through these things as they've journeyed in their faith. Different parts of their lives, they've asked different questions, and so there's a good chance that they've actually wrestled through some of the same things that you're wrestling through. And if they haven't, there are other things that they have wrestled through, and that they know what it's like to have these doubts and these struggles and these questions. Right? Chances are that you're doubting or wondering about things that they might be able to either help you with, that they might be able to resonate with, that they themselves have been working through or have worked through in the past as well. Ask them. I encourage you, ask your parents, are there things about the Bible, are there things about God that you've doubted or wrestled with or had a lot of questions about that you just haven't found answers to yet? And see what they say. It might be a really interesting thing for you to do as we work through this series together. So the first thing and the most important thing is to share the things that we have questions about, to share the doubts that we're struggling with and wrestling with, right? To keep them on our minds and to suppress them is only detrimental to our faith. But to share them and to ask them and to help each other with the things that we're wrestling with helps not only encourage each other because we see that we're not alone in the things that we're wrestling with, but we can help each other out as we're trying to find those answers, as we're trying to figure out how we move past this and how we handle these things. And it kind of takes that doubt out of the darkness and brings it into the light for everyone to be able to rally around each other with. It takes some vulnerability, and it takes some courage and some honesty, but that's exactly what we want our small groups to be about. So today I encourage you, find something, what is something that you can share with your small group that you've struggled with or wrestled with or kind of maybe have some doubts about, that you're not sure about, and see what they say, see what comes up. Accept each other's answers, share with each other, be open, be vulnerable, and we're just modeling what the church is like when we're able to do those things together. As we share our questions and work on not suppressing them and not pushing them down in a way, one of the other things that's really important to do is to actively try to find answers to the questions that we have and the doubts that we have. There's this guy by the name of Lee Strobel. You might have heard of him before. Lee was a journalist for the Chicago Tribune, a big paper, and Lee set out to show proof, to find proof that Christianity was false. And so that would be, he kind of dedicated his life for a time trying to prove Christianity to be false. And he would find something that he would kind of address and attack, and he would go after that hard. And you know what? After all the research that he did and after all the time that he spent on it, he actually found evidence to support that it was true. And that happened time and again. Lee would find a thing that he would want to address and say, here, let me show you that Jesus didn't really die. And the more that he dove into that, the more proof that he found that Jesus actually did live and did die. The more he dug up some of these things and these questions that he had, he found answers to, and he found things to be true. He actually became a believer as he was searching for things to be false about the Bible, and the more things he found to be true, he came to faith, which is really cool. Lee then followed that up by writing this great study series called The Case for Christ. It's a book, it's a video. If you haven't read it or watched it yet, it's something that I encourage you to read or watch one day. The Case for Christ is a great resource, a great read. But the point is this, okay, that Lee had doubts, he had questions, he had struggles. And as he went and as he posed those questions, he found answers to them, and he wouldn't let go of it until he did. When we have these questions, when we have these doubts, when we have these struggles, don't just let them sit and simmer. Find answers to them, address them, look it up, research it, ask people about it and see what they have to say. There are lots of resources for us to use and utilize as we have things that we wrestle with and struggle with, and so use them. I encourage you, explore, find ways that you can find some answers to these questions. You might not be able to find answers to all the questions that you have, but a good number of them, I bet you can. If you're not sure where to start, ask your leader, ask me, reach out, ask your parents. There's lots of resources that I'm sure that they can help you with as well, as you just begin to explore some of the questions that you kind of want some answers to. So we express our doubts. We search for answers to some of the questions that we have, but there's one more thing that we can do, and that is turn our doubts over to Jesus. Tell him about the things that we're wrestling with and that we're doubting through, right? Allow him to show you some of the answers, or some of the doubts. Answer some of your doubts like he did to Thomas. Truth is that God already knows exactly what we're wrestling with. God knows what we're struggling with. God knows what we're doubting. And so inviting him into that is a really important thing for us to do. Sharing that doubt with him, most of all, is one of the biggest things that we can do, and just allowing him in, wrestling with it with him, praying through it with him, and asking God to help you find answers to your questions, or asking God to answer your questions for you and to show you or to give you faith are all great things to do. So bring your doubts to Jesus and allow him to help you with some of the things that you're struggling with. It's honestly the best thing that we can do. Each week in this series, we've made a declaration. So far, we've declared that I am because we are, that we stand together through it all. We have declared that I will live by faith and not by fear. And tonight, as we're talking about doubts, we want to declare another thing together. We want to be on the same page about this. And so if you're serious about this, I encourage you to share it with your small groups. Say it together, whether you say it all at the same time or say it one at a time, and allow every person to share for themselves. Okay, here's what we want to declare today for everyone to know. We want to declare this because we believe it. So if you're serious about this, I encourage you to declare it as well. that I will not let my doubts define my faith. I will not let my doubts define my faith. With our doubts, we share the things that we doubt, that we're wrestling with, that we're struggling through. We express them with others. We talk about them. We look for answers and to the questions that we have and the things that we're struggling with, and we ask someone for help if we need to do that, right? If we're kind of stuck. Most of all, we bring our doubts to Jesus and allow him to show us the answers and to guide us as we work through these things. Don't let your doubts define your faith. Let me pray as we go into our small groups for tonight. God, we're so thankful for you and everything that you've done. We're thankful for, as we just talked through the book of John, as we talked about Thomas, about the example that he sets about this doubt that we can have and how we wrestle through that. We thank you that you don't shame him, just like you don't shame us for having these doubts. And they're not, God, that you rebuke him, but you don't cast him aside and you don't throw him aside. God, these doubts and these questions that we have, everyone has them. And so, God, as we express them, as we share them, as we wrestle with them, and as we work through them, will you give us the courage to share about them with our small groups? Give us the courage to share about it with our parents, and even ask them, what are some of the things that you've wrestled with? God, I pray that as we work through the doubts that we have, God, that you would help us find answers to the questions that we're faced with, that you would help us and reveal to us some of the things that we're struggling with, just like you revealed yourself to Thomas after the resurrection. So, God, with these doubts that we have, we just lay them before you. We want to find answers to them. We want to explore these things. So, God, help us as we do that together. In your name I pray. Amen. We're going to just close off the night in our small groups. We encourage you to chat and to talk about some of those doubts that you have. And we look forward to, even though we won't have youth next week, we look forward to getting together again in a couple weeks from now. So have a great rest of your night.